can sometimes feel like a lot, but you don't have to do it alone. I strongly believe that we're stronger together. Here, we're going to slow down, have real talks, make sense of things together, and explore ways to intentionally grow the life you want. We're going to talk about mental and physical health, relationships, money, work, and community. Welcome to Rooted in Intention with me, Karina Gomez. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Rooted in Intention. Today, we're going to be diving in and hearing about one person's journey in creating a plant-based taqueria. I'm joined by special guest Berenice Vargas Luna, who is the co-founder of El Hongo Magico, a plant-based taqueria in Chicago. So, Berenice, thank you so much for joining me today. And to get us started, can you share a little bit about what inspired the start of the taqueria and going plant-based?
It was all a health journey. My partner and I were both dealing with chronic diseases. I was a diabetic and had been diagnosed as a diabetic for years, and wasn't really doing much to manage my diabetes. Wasn't taking the medication, but also wasn't doing the checking of the blood sugar, right, and see where your levels are at, or eating the right meals. My partner was suffering from colon disease and had been suffering from that, where it landed him in the hospital for the last 7 years. So every year he had to go in the hospital for a couple of weeks to deal with the complications. And what he had was an abscess and a perforation in his colon. So the pandemic, right? The pandemic, we were quarantining together. And so I can remember very clearly his last hospital visit due to pain. And the doctors were saying, you need to remove 18 inches of your colon. This is the only solution at this point. He is a researcher. And so he started to look up, okay, well, what is the surgery? What is the recovery? What are the complications? And that's when we also forget and we realize that it's not just the actual surgery, but also what happens after that, right? There's recovery and there's complications, and things don't always go the way that they should. And so those are the things that you also have to account for. So in his research, he found that plant-based eating, specifically whole foods plant-based eating, was a form of treatment that athletes were using because of all of the healing that it does to the body, all the benefits that it provides, reduces inflammation and takes care of a lot of issues. And so instead of going through that surgery, he decided, I'm going to go plant-based. I'm going to go gluten-free. I'm going to, eat like this for a while and see what difference it makes and see if it does anything. And like I mentioned before, we were quarantined together. I was a diabetic, and I thought, okay, well, I'll embrace this as an opportunity to also change my diet, right? Something that I knew I should have been doing anyway. And so we went on this journey together. So it all started with a boy. It all started with my partner. Who, we lived with loved ones, and it's either our issues, our health issues, or theirs, right? And so when we were quarantined together, we had to kind of come together and say, okay, what does this look like now? And we started to figure out, well, what do we eat now? What does plant-based mean? What does whole foods mean? What does gluten-free mean? And just going down the rabbit hole of figuring out all these different types of things. And so that's really what started the journey, was we started to eat those plants and started to see in less than a year all the benefits. He was able to heal his perforation abscess in his colon. I reversed myself out of the diabetes range. And so
Oh,
there's a
that's
measure,
great.
yeah, there's a measure of a A1C for those of us that are familiar, and there's a diabetic range. And so I was very high in that diabetic range. I was at a 9.3. And within the year, I was down to like a 4.1, which put me outside of the range. And a lot of other good things happened, right? We lost weight, lost inflammation. I used to have a lot of ear infections. He used to have a lot of migraines. All those things started to disappear. And so that's really what kept us going on this journey, was the food, But what we found is that we had to cook everything ourselves. We
Mhm.
couldn't, the convenience of ordering a pizza was gone or driving through somewhere was gone. There was no more of that because the reality is that our food systems are not built to feed us real food, what I've come to know as real food versus fake food. With all the genetically modified ingredients now that you might find, you really have to look at labels. And so El Hongo Magico was born because we started to use mushrooms specifically as our meat swap. So he and I are both Mexicanos. We grew up in Chicago. We grew up eating tacos as much as pizza. And so what happens when you lose your tacos de asada del pastor, that was my favorite, we had to find a way to make food that was familiar. We didn't want to give up eating tacos. We didn't want to give up eating tamales.
Mhm.
And so the mushroom really served as that perfect meat alternative that gave us all these different benefits. And the more we used it, the more we fell in love with it. And yeah, one day I came home from work and Carlos says, "What do you think if we open a restaurant with all these different foods we've been making?" Okay, let's do let's do it. And then from there, that's where the taqueria was born. That was 3 years ago now.
That's beautiful to hear because I think there's so much power in doing things with another person, and the fact that you were able to work with your partner and kind of moving into really a new space around food and what that looks like in the kitchen and your daily habits. And I'm curious a little bit about your health journey with diabetes. Was it something that you had considered before of looking at your diet and what to do, or was it really in the background for you up until you had to kind of reconsider your health alongside your partner?
It's something that I'd been struggling for years, even before my partner. And it was something that I didn't really understand. To this point, I'm at 80 to 90 pounds of weight loss. So at that time, I was dealing with the diabetes because of unhealthy eating habits, but also with an unhealthy weight. And that was causing a lot of other complications with my menstruation cycle, for example. Like I mentioned, migraines and headaches, right? It affects so many different places in your body. And so for me, it became a way to try something else. And for me, dealing with my diabetes before that, I equated it to weight loss, and it's
Mm,
not the same. When we think about healthy lifestyles or care of self, it's doing what's good for your body, right? So if it's to drop weight, that's great. But the act of dropping the weight is doing all these other things. And so what I learned was to change the way I view food and to understand it that eating is fueling and
mhm,
that we have a relationship with our bodies through food. And we've all heard food is medicine. And I think through, again, the systems that we have in place, convenience over quality gives us that perception. But what I realize is like, oh, what I put in my mouth, how I eat actually impacts. It has an immediate impact in my body. So I get to choose every single time, right?
mhm.
That choice for myself. I'm going to do this because I feel it makes me feel good. And I'm not doing these other behaviors because, I've seen what that does to me. So it really was more so, years of being on different diet plans and trying different things and Weight Watchers, Atkins, like all those things. I went through all of those, right? The home remedies, todo. And it wasn't until I started eating plants that one, it was effortlessly. The more complicated part was figuring out how to cook plants, because that's another thing that we're not really in tune with. Something that, as I mentioned before, I'm Mexican American. So in Mexico, vegetables, corn, mushrooms, frijoles, those are all basic foundation standards. So to eat plants shouldn't be that abnormal or right. And so what we found is that we need to kind of go back to that form of eating for a
Mhm.
lot of different ways. And so for me, it was changing my relationship with food that I had been dealing with for basically my whole adulthood. teenagehood, right? Because I've been dealing with this forever, right? Like I remember being in high school and being overweight and having, already body aches, right? And I feel much better in my body now than I did back then. So yeah, for me, it's been like a whole journey, and it wasn't just a specific. This was more so like, okay, finally we found something that works, and we're just gonna stick with it.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think to what you were saying around just going back to the basics, I think a lot of Mexican food we forget is already based on whole foods. When I think about the home cooked meals that my mom made, the meals that my mom was cooking, it was like the jitomate, the onion, the garlic. It was all already whole foods. And sometimes it's just about making a few tweaks here and there.
Exactly. And that's what we found. I went back to my childhood because even our parents are falling into the same traps, right? They're working, they take care of families, and so you end up prioritizing other things. But when we went back, and oh, my mom used to make tortas de esto, tortas de papa, ejotes, lentejas, and lentejas is like my ultimate favorite dish that my mom made. And so I went back to those things. And then, luckily we have internet now. We have AI now that we can use responsibly and effectively, to help us figure out and navigate, well, what does whole food plant-based mean? And what
Mhm.
does gluten-free mean? Because that was the other part that we had to figure out is how do you make it familiar? How do you make it not boring?
Mhm.
And how do you ensure that you're going down the right path that you're choosing for yourself? And there's so many ways to approach eating, and there's so many labels out there too. And I think it's more so going back to the intention of what eating is.
And I think it's one thing to be able to be embracing the flavors and the basics, and then also the experimentation of the new creation. So, like the tacos, there's obviously that new component of working with mushrooms. And I'm wondering if you could walk me through a little bit of what that process was like to come to the final version of the tacos that you all serve now.
Oh my goodness. So it's April of 2021. Carlos and I are in Mexico City, and we
Oh,
had
I
just
love
turned.
Mexico City. So much
Yes,
good food.
yes. And I think, the universe aligned itself to put us in the right spaces and the right times to really put us along this path. And so we were in Mexico City, and I think we Googled like vegan food or lo que sea, right? And so we ended up in this restaurant called Los Losers. And we ordered chilaquiles and whatever, and they bring the plate, and we see the steak on the plate, and we're like, waiter, we thought this was a vegan place, maybe we didn't look at it right, or maybe, he's like, oh, that's a mushroom. And so what was on the plate was an oyster mushroom that was big enough, and it was grilled and seasoned to look like a piece of skirt steak. And that was our first introduction to a mushroom that wasn't like the mushroom that you eat on pizza, right? Again,
Mhm.
Chicago, sausage, mushrooms, pepperoni, that was my pizza flavor. But that's the only way I ever had mushrooms before. Like it just seemed like a side that you put on your pizza. That's
Mhm.
it. When we tried that oyster mushroom, sneaking, playing around like it was a steak, our minds were just blown. And so everywhere we went that trip, mushrooms, 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 mushrooms. We were
Mhm.
just looking for mushrooms everywhere. And in Mexico, you'll find them. It's one of those ingredients, just like corn, just like everything else, that is very common there, and people are very familiar with it. Um, and so we started using mushrooms, and the more mushrooms that we use, because there's so many varieties, we began to learn like, oh, you could use this for that. And
Mhm.
different textures gives you, different varieties. It's very similar to meat, right? If we're talking protein to protein. Um, for me, my favorite tacos were tacos de al pastor. It's a
Mhm.
marinated pork, like in a red chile, usually traditionally served with like a little bit of piña. That was my favorite taco. And so no more tacos. We're vegan now. And what we're finding was there's a lot of like vegan impossible options or vegan, alternative meat like that, but not again, clean food, whole food. And so we made our own. And so at home, I started playing with a red chile marinade that I started working with. And we've tweaked it along the way to kind of really make it our own. And that signature marinade, we marinate cremini mushrooms, and that became our signature taco Magico. And so those marinated mushrooms were on a taco with red cabbage, cilantro, cebolla, a green salsa. But then people started saying like, "Ooh, this would be good in a tamal." So we put it in a tamal. "Ooh, this would be good. Can I take it home?" And so now we're working on creating ready to take home that people can take home and make their mushrooms and add it to their own meals to make it easier and more accessible for people to bring in. But again, it came from me wanting a taco, and I was like, how do I make a taco del pastor that is going to work for me now? And that's where the story came. And again, like I said, the more we played with mushrooms, we found so many varieties. And we also found that there's a lot of fans out there for mushrooms. You either love them or you hate them. There's no in between. And when you find the mushroom fans, they love it, right? They're all about it. But even those that you don't see are fans of mushrooms, because again, it's that perception. They're earthy, they're gross, they're soggy, que esto que el otro. And what we found is that you just have to learn how to cook them. And so our first year in business, we're making the tacos, making these ingredients, getting them out there. But by the time we got to our second and third year in business, we realized this is beyond selling tacos. We would need to understand, our community needs to understand how to cook these mushrooms so that they could cook
Mhm.
it at home, how to cook this way and eat this way so that we can reconnect to feeling good in our bodies and to be more intentional. And so we started doing mushroom cooking workshops and tamal
Mm.
workshops, platicas where we talk about, how to treat the mushrooms, how to store them, and what to do with them. And we've done it in communities. We've done it in schools. Illinois actually has a plant forward lunch program where in the schools they have to offer a plant-based option, which I think is amazing.
Mhm.
Because as an adult, like I could get to make my choices, but imagine a child that doesn't want to meet certain things. If they're limited to me as an adult, a child is going to be even more limited, right?
Yeah. And I'm hearing how there's this natural evolution of the different recipes that you all worked on based off just feedback and then opportunities that you saw as well with the community workshops, because I think there's so much power in saying like, hey, you can buy this here and also you could make this at home if you have the time and the energy. To what you were saying, sometimes people do want convenience. They get tired out of work and that type of thing. So being able to go to a taqueria and be like, I want to buy these right now, but then also being able to cook those at home. I think that's so powerful. And I'm curious, although there was that natural evolution, what was the original vision for the taqueria?
And the original vision was offering mushroom tacos. We had a mushroom taco flight that we ended up calling. It was three different types of tacos, three different types of mushrooms, cada uno diferente. And what we really wanted to do was stay away from mimicking other things. So our menu won't have tacos del pastor. It'll say taco mágico because we wanted to embrace the mushrooms and the ingredients for the power and the benefits that they have without having to make them look like something else, right? They could stand on their own. And so that's why we came out with three mushroom tacos first. And so that was our first. And we had two diferentes salsas. And if los mexicanos saben, salsa and spice levels are so important in our cooking, whether you're on the mild side or on the, oh my God, it's so hot side. I'm more on the mild side. My partner's on the hot side. And so um, I clearly remember when we told our parents that we're opening a restaurant separately, but both our moms, him and mine, were like, okay, pero la salsa, better be good. Like, tiene que estar buena la salsa.
Yes.
And so, everything that we do is with intention. And so the salsas that we created, one of them is uh, we call it Granny's green salsa, jalapenos, garlic. It is a recipe that has been passed down in my partner's family for generations, right? It goes back 100 years. And so we wanted to bring that in. It's like this bright green color, so it just looks really great. And then we offered the regular tomato-based salsa because that's what's familiar. So green and red, right? Those are
Mhm.
the things that you're familiar with. We wanted to use handmade corn tortillas because to me, like las tortillas hechas a mano, they give you just that much
Mm.
more sabor and authenticity. Um, so that was a specific vision that we had, and we wanted to bring tacos. What we found was tamal season came. How do we make tamales that are veganos, right? Usually you use some kind of lard or manteca. My mother-in-law was the one who said, well, I gotta make tamales for mi hijo. What do you mean he's not gonna have tamales anymore,
Mm.
right? And so I remember being in her kitchen and using coconut oil to replace that animal-based fat. Y de ahí salieron la receta de los tamales. And we're
Mhm.
like, okay, this works. And so I started, tweaking it, and now we started adding tamales to the menu. And from there, it's just been adding a little bit here and there because we are a mobile restaurant. And so when we started in year one, we thought,
Mm.
oh, we're going to have a restaurant, we're going to have, sit down, what you think of a traditional restaurant. But what we found was our journey has just taken us to way different places. We've done events and festivals, the large ones here in Chicago. We've operated a food hall that was the first all vegan food hall in Chicago.
Wow.
It's since closed because it just needed so much more love. And now doing the cooking and the workshops. I in year one, I would have never thought that people would want to learn how to make tamales or
Mhm.
that we would be teaching people how to make mushrooms. And so I sometimes I do wish like, oh, I wish we had a restaurant, but it would be so much different than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know, just sometimes going along with the journey and being open to how things end up unflowing. I'm curious what difficulties were coming up for you, either on the business front or personally in the transition to going plant-based.
Oh, I'll start with family first
Mhm.
because in both of our families, he and I were the first to make this change. There are no other, vegans or really any other dietary needs in the family. And so I remember the first Thanksgiving, we could only eat mashed potatoes because there was nothing else
Oh
on the
no.
table that did that, you know what I mean? And so that was such a lesson for me in that if I had a hard time figuring out what that looked like for me,
Mhm.
I can't assume that my mom or my family is going to be able to figure it out and just, come along with me. I have to do a little more to kind of explain, like, okay, well, this is what we eat or this is what we don't eat. And so what happened was we started making the Mahiko mushrooms. I would marinate those and then I would take mushrooms with me. So if my mom was making gorditas, then I would have my mushrooms to eat the gorditas or the tacos or the pozole or the whatever. So that was that first Thanksgiving. Last year's Thanksgiving, my mom hizo, I can't remember if it was Thanksgiving. Yeah, I think it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. Hizo un pozole vegano y un pozole regular.
What?
Okay. Which I was so excited about, right? Like we got our own pozole, that's amazing. And the funny part was that all the family started digging in on the vegano pozole because it was so much better. And
Really?
my mom made a smaller pot of the vegan pozole than she had of the big, of the el de puerco. And she was I just remember it. Sorry, mom. I remember she was freaking out. Se va a acabar. Nos están comiendo el pozole. And oh my God, And to me, it was just the funniest thing in the world that you put both options and yet people, like at the end of the day, and it just goes to show that el sabor,
Mhm.
right? If you can get the sabor, then, if it's animal or if it's a vegetable, at the end of the day, el sabor es lo que importa.
Mhm.
That's what we're looking for. So if you're hitting that, I think, that you hit a home run. So I think family, I think it's the hardest part of making that transition and understanding, going on vacation, right? Going to restaurants. We have to be patient when they want to go eat seafood in the steakhouse and then hope that we find something. Or sometimes we will say, like, okay, you eat that, and we're going to go and we're going to try this. So you have to find that balance, but there should be I've noticed an opening there versus the first year versus now, and it's education, constant
Mhm.
education, like, oh, no comes pescado, like, no, that's animal too.
Mhm.
It's just like,
Mhm.
a lot of education. So I think that in terms of the business side, we're we're first gen, we're first time entrepreneurs. We both have degrees, but not degrees in business or degrees in running a business. And so we had to learn going through all the hoops of opening up a business and get all your licenses. And for food safety, you have to get certifications and food safety handlers and, get a uniform. You wear a hat now and, like learning all these things. So that was a lot of the first year was just learning like all of this now. In our second year, we were working in a shared kitchen. So then it was learning how to work in a shared kitchen, sharing space with other cooks and other things going on and equipment. And that was a lot of fun. I do miss that. So yeah, I think it's just learning it all, and learning it on our own because we
Mhm.
didn't necessarily have, people around us that we could say, hey, ¿cómo le hiciste así? Or ¿cómo le hiciste así?
Mhm.
We have been lucky in having individuals that have supported the vision or who have seen it or have been part of the planning process. And in our first year, they were there cooking with us when we couldn't hire people. They were there moving things with us when when it was just Carlos and myself. And
Mhm.
so yeah, I think it's just doing the things for the first time, bootstrapping it, right? Because we're doing it on our own. From year one to now, it's just made a huge difference and things get easier and you find community. And I think community is like the biggest payoff from all of this is that, yes, all the work y todo, but the community that we have found is just, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, being able to lean on family, friends, and the community to, like you said, help when you might need some support and when you're navigating a lot of new situations. And I know I've heard that just sometimes understanding and getting permits from cities and state departments can be super difficult. I'm wondering what helped keep you grounded during those times, in addition to community and family and friends.
Oh, I think a couple of things. Each other, right? My partner and I, we we do things together, but each one using their strength. So Carlos was really good in the first year of getting all the business licenses and all those things in order. And I had 17 years of trade show experience in marketing. And so I focused on the brand and the marketing and doing pop-ups and the look and right. I
Mm.
focused on that. And so we kind of balanced each other out to be able to do those things. The other part was it never felt like I'm just selling tacos or I'm just selling tamales because our customers were individuals that needed or wanted something different, right? Whether they were dealing with diabetes or colon disease like Carlos and I, or maybe they had celiac disease, or maybe they have a dairy or soy or nut allergy. And we started to meet individuals, like I clearly remember la señora that came up to me with a card, and on the card laminated, it had like a list of 30 things that she couldn't eat.
Oh my God.
Eggplant, tomato, like just random things. And so you start to realize that people need different diets for a lot of different reasons. It isn't just because like I choose to eat plants, like at the end of the day, that's why I'm plant-based. Now I'm choosing that. But there are individuals who don't get a choice. It's like
Mhm.
that's what you can eat because you can't eat other things.
Mhm.
And so what grounded us was understanding that this food was providing an option to someone that maybe didn't have an option. And people would tell us that, like, I didn't want to come here because I didn't think I was going to find anything to eat. And
Mhm.
so we ended up being that option for individuals. The people that said, I haven't had tamales in years because I haven't found a vegan tamal. So those individuals that really needed the food and really appreciated, like those were the people that really grounded us to, like, we need to keep going because we need more options like this.
And that's how the community workshops around how to prepare this at home came up, I imagine, as well.
Yes, yes, we started to see that. One, people couldn't understand that we were using mushrooms as a meat replacement. They were
Mm,
like, "Okay." And but it isn't just about, but then you have to combat the stigma around mushrooms,
mm,
right? They're too soggy, they're too earthy, or that they can be too expensive, right? There are some
mm,
mushrooms out there, the culinary mushrooms, that are, 10 or more dollars per pound.
mm,
But those are gourmet, culinary, fancy,
mm,
right? There's the cremini or the white button or the portobello, which is the three that we used, and we used that on purpose
mm.
so that again, you can use these mushrooms at home. This white button mushroom is going to cost you $4 for a pound. And so it's a huge difference. And so we wanted to teach like all these different things as organizations started reaching out to us and saying, okay, like how do you cook these mushrooms? Or they wanted to create experiences where people could understand that relationship of eating is fueling.
And I imagine you can go on and on about this, but I'm curious if you have some of the top tips for cooking with mushrooms.
Mm, yes, 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 yes. Top tips. If you are new to mushrooms, stick with the white button mushroom. It's going to be the least expensive, more abundant option that you have. Stick with something local, something, cheaper. White button mushrooms. They already have an umami flavor, which mimics the flavor of meat protein. So treat the mushroom like you would treat your any other protein. Season it the way you would, marinate it, cook it, treat it the same. What you should know is that mushrooms are little sponges. So you have to cook out all the moisture out, because that's what makes the mushrooms soggy. Cook them at high heat. Once that moisture is out of there, you can season and then you can start cooking it to the temperature and texture that you like. And that's all you have to do, right? Just remember you cook them through because they're little sponges. And because they are sponges, they're great for taking flavors. So marinating them works really well, seasoning them works really well, and you can cook them in any way. Saute, oven, bake, everything works in everywhere.
I personally love the texture of mushrooms, but I'm curious for going back to the pozole that your mom made. Did it have mushrooms as well?
She made it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm one of the things for the pozole that comes to mind is a lot of the flavor comes from the bone broth. So I'm almost curious what brought a lot of the flavor to the pozole, unless it's a family secret.
Give you that secret. So
Okay.
we used to make our pozole making a portobello broth. So you make your own veggie broth, right? You make
Mhm.
your own veggie broth, you cook your portobellos, and then you take the portobellos out, right? If you don't want that to mix in with the texture. But portobellos have, of all the mushrooms, I feel like have the meatiest flavor. And so that's why we use portobello, just to give us more intensity in that flavor. So we make a stock with that, and then that's the stock that we use in the pozole with the marinade and then everything else. And then we would also add mushrooms at the end of it too. So with the granitos and everything, but mushrooms at the end también, just so that it has, and that mushroom ends up being like the meat of the pozole.
Okay. Thank you for sharing the
Yeah.
tips, the family secret. And you shared already a little bit about how you stayed grounded throughout the journey. And there's obviously a lot of intentionality that goes into going plant-based in a society that isn't fully plant-based. And there's a lot of meat out there. I'm curious what plant-based means to you now, if the process has been easier or if it's still something that you have to be very intentional, not just because you have to be intentional, but I guess that it requires a lot of energy type of thing.
It does, but you're actively making that choice,
Mm,
right? And for me, the first year was really about getting to understand the foods. And we also fell into the vegan junk food trap, right? We
mm.
went vegan and then we went to the store and we bought everything that said vegan on it or had the little leaf, and then started to gain weight. And we were like, okay, well,
You're like,
what,
hold on.
what's the issue? And then we realized, oh, you're still buying a lot of processed. It's still in a box or a package. And that's when we thought, oh, okay, whole food, plant-based. And
Mhm.
so we started even defining. So when I started the journey, I started as a vegetarian. Carlos started completely gluten-free and the cleanest form because he was trying to avoid surgery. I wasn't necessarily trying to avoid surgery. I said, okay, I'll go on this journey with you and see what happens. And so I went vegetarian because for me, eggs, un huevito
Mm,
estrellado was like, oh my God, the best thing in the world. And how can you give that up? But little by little, I found that even what I was looking for, ya no se me antojaba those things.
mm,
And so I found that it was easy for me to just let go of cheese and eggs because I wasn't really craving it. My body was really happy with all the other mushrooms and all the things that I was eating. Um, and what I also found is that it gives you a lot of variety.
mm,
When you tend to eat the same things or a certain way, you eat the same things, right? Pizza Friday night, a cheeseburger, hamburger somewhere, some tacos, right? Whatever. But now we have to actively cook. So now you have to get creative and you're at the grocery stores. And so it changes even the way you shop. It's, even the way you plan for your meals. And it was definitely for me first about the food, all about the food. And then I started to see all the changes it started to make. And then I started to understand that by being plant-based, we're reducing our carbon footprint. We're using less water automatically. And that's another part of the community that we did not anticipate finding was the sustainable community.
mm,
By us being plant-based, we're automatically in that community. And then we started taking on more of those behaviors to be even more green or more sustainable, trying to minimize waste, trying to work with organizations like Plant Chicago. They did a waste audit in the first year of our business, and they were like, make purchases like this or buy bulk here. They made suggestions to kind of help you live a more sustainable, or as they call circular economy, right?
mm,
Where you are reducing, reusing, repurposing, recycling as much as you can. Um, and then from there, it evolved into I have plants all over the house now. Like I'm a total plant lady.
mm,
I, it really has converted into fueling my body the right way, into finding food as medicine and also as a connection to my ancestry. What did they eat before? Plant-based looks a lot similar to that than what we're eating now. And so connecting back to that and connecting to a deeper self of awareness. And so I'm now on this whole other journey, and plants and plant-based is now part of my life and how I live. So I try to actively buy things that are vegan or fake leather or things
mm,
like that, right? Like, so now it's expanded beyond what I eat to also the things I consume physically around me too, and try to recycle and reduce and do all those things where I can. And so it's definitely expanded into a lot of different, and for Carlos as well in a few different ways. Um, so yeah, it's definitely just the starting point, and then it just kind of goes from there.
mhm. And that's really what I'm hearing is just how one thing led to the next. And then you almost started creating this new identity, it seems like. And the more that you learned, you kind of started implementing more things, like you said, around the environmental impact of thing, which is so important. And yeah, I'm a little curious about the study that they did. What were they looking at?
So, so they had us save 1 week's worth of our waste. And so the trash bags, we just kept it in, and then we delivered them. And then they went through all of it. And so what they wanted to see was, are we recycling?
Mm,
Are we composting where we can? Are we buying in bulk instead of buying 10 bags of masa? Can I buy one
mm,
big bag? Um, so looking at those things, looking even at how things were packaged. When you go to the grocery store, you automatically grab the little bolsita for the grocery and you put your groceries in there. But do you need that for every single thing?
mhm,
Probably not, right? And so now we started to use less of those bags and only use it for the things that, really are going to fall out or you have a bulk of. But if it's just like one apple or one thing, why are you using a bag? And so it
mhm,
just made us like, oh, okay, really pay attention to how we're using the things around us. And we can never get to like 100% total green We still drive a car. We still own a business. We still
Mhm.
use, right? We still use resources to create. And so we're very conscious of that. But we try to choose things that are, you know, taking up less, hopefully, and also trying to give back to.
Mhm. And it's all a process. There'll be some episodes that come out around environmental issues. And I think that's kind of the point that a lot of people eventually reach is sometimes trying to go to the extreme and be like, oh my God, I have to do all the things. And then be like, okay, how can we actually make these things sustainable for the environment? But then sustainable also in terms of eating habits. Like it's been a process of what does plant-based look like for you and for Carlos as well. And I'm curious about tips that you might give to listeners for people that want to go plant-based or maybe even open up their own restaurant to fill a need in the community where there might not be other healthier options. What tips would you have for folks?
Do it. Number one, do it. If you see a need, fill that gap. And what we're finding is that our community really needs to step up and fill those gaps, and especially from a culturally relevant perspective. So in our case, El Hongo Mágico was named El Hongo Mágico en Español, right? We did certain things on purpose because we wanted to really convey our cultura,
Mm,
right? We're Mexican, we speak Spanish as well as English. We're from Chicago, we're from Mexico, we eat pizza, we eat tacos. We wanted to make sure that we showed all of that in our brand to show the diversity that exists and the diversity that we still need. Should there be way more, culturally based options? Of course. I mean, it would be amazing. So I think there's a big opportunity for people to bring back their cultura. Yesterday, I went to a workshop where we did pan de muerto, right?
mhm,
This is, around the Dia de los Muertos or Dia de Muertos. And so some of those traditions, right? It's so important that we keep those. And it's, a baker who is teaching, the rest of the community how to do that.
mhm,
And so I think those are the things that are so important that they do. So if you have a skill like that, I never thought I was going to be teaching people how to make tamales. My mom taught me that. All five of us, I have four other siblings, and all of us know how to make tamales from beginning to end
mm,
because my mom taught us desde chiquitos and she would make us do all the different elements. And so now as adults, we all get together and we make tamales and it is convivir, right? And chismear, and, right? You're hanging out and you're spending time together more so than, everybody has their own family, their own things going on. And so now getting back together and doing that, something that we used to do like decades ago and that we continue to do, it just makes us so much more special. And so I think we can't lose those things. We
mhm,
can't, we can't lose las tradiciones. We can't lose what makes us so unique. And the more we put of that out there, I think do it. It will be hard. Entrepreneurship is one of the toughest things that you will do, but there is community and there is support and there's resources. And so as long as you're tapping into those locally and then nationally también, in person and online, especially now, there's so many communities now that are there to support. So I would say do it.
mhm,
Do it, do it,
mhm.
do it.
And I imagine that some folks that might be interested in opening up a restaurant, going the entrepreneurship route, that there might be the idea of like, oh, that costs money. I'm wondering if that was ever one of the things that you guys considered and how you navigated that.
Yeah, everything costs money. And so what we had to find, and what was very difficult in the first year to now, I think it's gotten better, is, you know, starting right off the gate, you want everything. I want all the best things, and I want this and that, and da da da. And you have this vision in your mind, and then you realize, okay, you have to maybe bring it down a little bit, and also realize that what good would it have done me to have like this commercial oven in my first year in business?
Mhm,
Probably not much because that's not what I was doing my first year in business. So I think when we have these ideas for the business is you have to pick one out of all the ones that you have, pick one, and that's the one you're going to focus on. And then when you get there, you pick the next one and then you go, you know what I mean? Because we see other people doing all these other things and we think that we need to be at that level too. Pero you have to put in the work and the
Mhm.
effort and the experience and you have to get the skills even, cooking in the kitchen here at home, way different than cooking in a commercial kitchen. That was like my biggest aha moment. And so yeah, just figuring those things out and prioritizing, you know, year one, year two, year three, and so on.
Mhm.
Business plans are so important,
Mhm.
even a basic one, because it's going to give you some guidance into where your business is going. And like I said, year one we were selling tacos. Year three we're looking to package our marinated mushrooms.
Mhm.
Right? You just never know where you're going to go. So just being open and really just focusing on one, because you
Yeah.
have to take it step by step. We want to do it all, pero paso a paso.
Little bite-sized pieces, or else it's just going to feel overwhelming.
And I would say the $1 million tip: get very used to and very comfortable talking about your business, who you are, what do you do, and who you serve. Because being able to talk about that in the spaces that you're in is what gives you opportunities. It's what gave us catering opportunities. It's what giving
Mhm.
us pitch opportunities. It's the more people you'll tell your story and the connection behind it, that's what really connects people to you and to follow you and to be loyal to you and to believe in what you're doing. And that's the other biggest thing. If there's
Mhm.
no connection there, then you know you're just you're just any other business, and that's cool too. Right, if that's what
Yeah.
you're doing. But setting expectations, right, especially for a lot of us, a business that you run is so tied to you, right? It's like your problem or your gap that you saw because it's tied to you or your loved one. So we're so close to it anyway, right?
Thank you, News, for sharing about your experience and all of the tips. Like you're almost providing a little consulting session right here, right now. But also about just sharing your story of going plant-based and then seeing that there was that community need and that you jumped in and be like, we want to be a part of sharing really the expertise that you collected from your own plant-based journey and providing food for people to come in and have that and then eventually help others learn how to make some of that at home. So thank you for joining me and sharing all of your wisdom. I think there's so much power in storytelling. And is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you think would be super cool for listeners to hear more about?
I think one of the when people hear that I'm plant-based, I always get the response, "Oh, I wish I could do that." And I what I would love to tell people, and I'm going to tell you all, is that you can. When you are motivated enough, whether it's because it's your partner in my case, or whether it's you, or whether it's your loved one, right? The people that we care that are around us, when we make these conscious choices, you can do it. And it's just a matter of figuring out the way that it looks like for you. So again, labels are okay as a guideline, but what does vegan or plant-based or gluten-free or whatever look like for you? And how do you feel best in your body? You can do that. We can all do that. And so I think it's just a matter of shifting our focus to what eating is. I'll say it again, eating is fueling. And once we really start to understand that, it makes it easier to make those conscious choices for yourself. And it's just
Mhm.
conscious eating, right? Being active and purposeful in what you're putting in your body.
Yeah. And that kind of reminds me to what you were saying when we first started about your own health journey and how you really made that switch from when you were thinking about diabetes of like associating that with weight loss. And that feels like it's such an external motivator.
Mhm.
And from what I've found in my own experience, the external motivators don't usually help in the long term. So making that pivot of, oh, the food that I'm eating is actually fueling me and really viewing it from that point, that's where it's like internally motivated, really, of like I'm doing this for me, not for others, not for this other thing outside, but it's for myself. So I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Yeah. And we wouldn't be doing our due diligence for people that are out in the Chicago area. Where can they try El Hongo Mágico?
Yes. So we have a couple of events coming up. I plan on doing some virtual workshops on making tamales. So look for that. And tamal season is here, so I will be announcing some dates where we're going to be doing a pre-order for tamales. Usually we do them around Thanksgiving, again, to give people an option. So if you're the plant-based person that can't eat at your relatives, or maybe you're the person who's cooking for others and have someone in your plate, right? We can't forget about every person that's there deserves to be there, deserves to be fed. And so we offer it around this time specifically just to make it easier for people to grab some tamales. And now you have something that you can sit down and eat and not just have mashed potatoes like Carlos and I are first Thanksgiving.
No, we need more substance than mashed potatoes.
Yeah, yes. So we'll be announcing more of that. Like I mentioned, we're more catering, so we're more pop-up by event than the traditional restaurants that you might see, but we pop up here and there.
Okay. And for folks outside of the Chicago area, do you host any online events?
Yes, we do. We do several mushroom cooking workshops that we've done. And so we'll continue to do those. I also was hosting a monthly conscious eating community, which is going to start back up in January, just because that's the time of year where we tend to, renew our resolutions, right? And in terms of care of self. So we'll be bringing back those conversations, and those are called Raíces Mágicas, and it's an online discussion group just talking about
Mhm.
food. What are those issues? What are those needs and wants that we have? And how can we support getting there and making those changes?
Okay. And with that, go check out El Hongo Mágico, folks. And thanks for tuning in for another episode. If y'all are feeling inspired either for your own journey, please leave a review and let us know what you thought of the show. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Rooted in Intention. Until next time, and remember to keep showing up for the life, relationships, and community you want. Now go, grow the life you want.